One of the things about it is that it just sort of goes on. Once we get going, I generally don't stop until I get to the end. Tonight it's a bit different. I've got a corner turned over on one of these sheets, which is sort of randomly selected. By the time we get to 1825, you're going to have a break for the raffle. You may think that's an arbitrary choice, but in fact, I looked through and it fits in very well, because by then I think I'll have just run out of my beer. You should all have one of these, except you'll have a blue one. I'm stuck with the old one. And you'll notice at the bottom it says songs and slides are occasionally changed. That's very useful for when I forget the song and then I just miss it out. And also if I go past the slides and things like that, you see. But in fact, it's a bonus night tonight because you've got an extra 2 songs in. There's another one after song number 19 called Miners' Grievances. And there's another one after song 22 called the Durham Lockout. And there are 4 extra slides. Oh, bargain night. We've got an extra 2 after number 25, which you'll see, and an extra 2 after number 30. So there we are. And if any of them don't turn up, it's because I've forgotten to put them in the projector. So I am a jovial collier, as jovial as can be, but if the trade is very bad, it means a lot to me. And if I stumble with me tongue, I've one excuse to say, it's not the collier's heart that's wrong, it's his head that's gone astray. Down in the coal mine, underneath the ground, where a gleam of sunshine is never to be found, taking dusky diamonds all the season round. Down in the coal mine, underneath the ground, how brave ye all them collier lads that toil beneath the ground, digging for the coal as the days and nights go round. And anxiously their families wait how often it is said, you never know till nightfall how many may be dead. Down in the coal mine, underneath the ground, where a gleam of sunshine is never to be found, taking dusky diamonds all the season round. Down in the coal mine, underneath the ground, how little do the rich man care who sit at home secure, what dangers all the colliers dare, what hardships they endure. The very fires they have at home to cure them and their wives, perhaps were kindled at the cost of jovial colliers' lives. Down in the coal mine, underneath the ground, where a gleam of sunshine is never to be found, taking dusky diamonds all the season round. Down in the coal mine, underneath the ground. I've actually started with a song from 1865. This whole sort of talk starts around about 1600, a little bit before that. But 1865 was when the actual problem of the miners was first getting into the notice of the British public. And this was one of the techniques that it managed to make it known, and that's the music hall. Because it became a very popular thing in Victorian times to be sort of melodramatic. And there were a tremendous amount of disasters around that time, and so the logical result of that was that there were lots of music hall songs created which sort of fed on this feeling of all of these children being left at home and the miners killed as they worked to support all the rich people. It was very much the rich man and the poor man having to work to keep them. The actual digging of coal in Durham and Northumberland, which is what we're generally going to cover tonight, has actually gone on for about 1,000 years. But it's really until about the 1860s that we know very much about what actually the lives of the colliers were like, or the social side of it, as well as the problems underground. There were all sorts of enquiries, but the actual publicity that the actual miners managed to get themselves didn't come until around about the 1860s. The earliest collieries, well, it couldn't really be called that. There were holes in the ground where people just used to go along, where the seams were near to the surface, they'd dig a hole and they'd start to uncover coal. In Newcastle, the king in 1235 granted a license to the people of Newcastle to dig for coals on Castle Field. Now, at the moment, of course, we're a bit short of coal, So if you want to just get a few bags together and get up to Newcastle, you can actually still do it, because that licence has never been revoked. You might have a bit of trouble with British Rail because it's in the middle of the marshalling yards in Central Station. But we actually did it for a rag stunt, and it didn't please them. Marching with our buckets and our shovels and trying to dig the coal. What happened was, of course, they used to start digging for the coal, and the holes used to get deeper and deeper. And when they were feeling brave and they were sort of about 10, 15 feet down into the ground, they'd start digging out to the sides, and it would get wider and wider. And you ended up what were called bell pits, for the simple reason that they were a bell shape inside. There was a logical end to these pits, much like the uneconomic pit of today. The trouble was they knew exactly when the end had come, because they dug too far and in it all came. They hadn't quite got round to pit props and things like that. So they had a limited life, bell pits. In 1354, there's actually mention, though, of the first sinking of a pit. This is a bit different than actually just digging out, but this is the technique of sinking a shaft to get at the coal measures. That goes back to 1354, which is quite a while ago when you consider the implements they had. The Latin monks around Chesley Street used to drift into the side of the hills from the riverbanks, where, of course, the river had cut down, and get their coal from there. And about 50 years ago, they came across some of these workings that the Latin monks had actually dug. And they were about a yard square, and they reckoned that they were dug just as though they'd been cut with a razor, absolutely square and absolutely smooth, beautiful workings. In the early days, the very early days of the pits, of course, you went down, and the further you got down, it used to get warmer, not because they were getting closer to hell, but simply because they didn't know anything about ventilation, and the air currents didn't move around. They did think they were getting closer to hell, however, and it caused a lot of consternation. And one of the oldest songs that's known in the, certainly in the Durham coalfield, is the Collier's Rant. I would have loved to have been I was about in 1947, but I'd love to have been actually at the celebrations for the nationalisation of the coal industry, if only for the fact that the massed choirs of the NCB sang the Collier's Rant. And having sung it for a number of years myself, I still don't know how a massed choir can get their tongues around all of the words all at the same time. The whole basis of the song is that they think that they're getting so near to hell that the devil comes, and the devil is responsible for all the accidents in the pit. And one of the things about pit ponies, like many animals, they have this extra sense, and in the event of something about to happen, they used to set off and run back, and they knew the direction to go. And the chorus is "Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie," is the basis that you follow the horses because they know the way out. Even if you don't yourself in the panic, the horses will get you out. As me and me Mara was ganning to walk, we met with the devil, it was in the dark. I up with me pick had been of the neat, and I hooked off his heat, and likewise his club feet. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, follow them through me canny lad, oh. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, how lad lie away me canny lad, oh. As me and me Mara was putting the tram, the low and wet out and me Mara went wrong. Ye would have laughed had ye seen the fine game, old Nick took me Mara, but I took the tram. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, follow them through me canny lad, oh. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, how lad lie away me canny lad, oh. Oh Mara, what dost thou think? I've broken me bottle and spilt all me drink. I've lost all me shin springs among the great stones, draw me to the shop, lad, it's time to gan yem. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, follow them through me canny lad, oh. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, how lad lie away me canny lad, oh. Oh Mara, where hast thou been? Driving the drift of the lower seam, driving the drift of the lower seam, hard up the low lad, they'll stop out thy yeam. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, follow them through me canny lad, oh. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, how lad lie away me canny lad, oh. Oh Mara, it's war pay week, we'll get penny loaves and we'll drink to our beak. We'll fill up our bumper and round it'll go. Follow the horses, Johnny lad, oh. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, follow them through me canny lad, oh. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, how lad lie away me canny lad, oh. Here's me horse and here's me tram, 2 yards full of grease till me come to gan. Here's me pittoggers likewise me half shoon, and smash me heart marrow, me puddings all done. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, follow them through me canny lad. Follow the horses, Johnny me laddie, how lad lie away me canny lad. By the year 1615, the trade from Newcastle actually employed themselves 400 ships. This was obviously to shift the coal, not to dig it, because tremendous demand for coal with industry, and also with obviously keeping people warm, more, actually probably at that time more than industry. There were 50 ships used to come in at a time from France for coal, and if you imagine 50 ships, that's some number to actually come into the River Tyne. If you've ever been there, you can just about jump over it. But this sort of large sale of ships and the 50 from France fairly well established the coal trade in the northeast as the biggest in the country at that time, and was vitally important to all of the people. Good people, listen while I sing the source from whence your comfort spring, and may each wind that blows still bring success unto the coal trade. Who but unlikely pleasure feels to say how fleets of ships and keels, Newcastle, Sunderland and Shields may ever bless the coal trade. What is it gives us cakes of meal? What is it crams our worms a wheel? With lumps of beef and draughts of ale, 'tis nothing but the coal trade. Not Dave's Straits, nor Greenland oil, nor all the wealth springs from the soil, could ever make our pots to boil, whatever but the coal trade. Ye sailors' wives who love a drop of stingo from the brandy shop, how could ye get one single drop if it were not for the coal trade? Ye pitmen lads so blithe and gay, who meet to tipple each payday, down on your marrow bones and pray success unto the coal trade. The main market for coal from Newcastle was, however, London. And, I mean, the 400 sail of ships regularly left to get down to London. And they went in these, the colliers. A couple of different sizes there, but that's the general shape of the collier. A flat-bottomed boat, remarkably unstable, especially when it was empty. This is a thing called a foy boat, which you used to get on the Tyne, which you could actually go down to the riverbank in 2 or 3 places, and you could pay your money and someone would row you across the river up to, I don't know, perhaps they still do it. Certainly when I was a kid they could do it. Foy coming from the word ferry, foy boat. Anyway, that's the collier. The collier was the main source of transport, and it was filled with keels which brought the coal down the river, which used to hold 8 of these. This is a Newcastle chaldron, and it's its proper name. Not just that it comes from Newcastle, but it's the actual measure of coal, which was 5,300 weights. If you go to York Railway Museum, you'll see a Newcastle chaldron in there. So it was, you used to have to learn your tables at school, 5,300 weights, 1 chaldron, 8 chaldrons, 1 keel. Which you all did. It used to be on the back of your exercise books. You probably never looked at it. Anyway, and of course, along with the miners, one of the standard bunch of characters on the Tyne were the keelmen. As I came through Sandgate, as I came through Sandgate, I heard a lassie sing. We'll may the keel row, the keel row, the keel row. We'll may the keel row that my laddie's in. He wears a blue bonnet, blue bonnet, blue bonnet. He wears a blue bonnet and a dimple in his chin. And we'll may the keel row, the keel row, the keel row. We'll may the keel row that my laddie's in. Ways like me Johnny, so Lisa so blithe, so bonny. He's foremost mongst the money, keel lads of Coley Tyne. And we'll may the keel row, the keel row, the keel row. We'll may the keel row that my laddie's in. May all the press gangs perish, each lass a laddie cherish. Long may the coal trade flourish along the Coley Tyne. And we'll may the keel row, the keel row, the keel row. We'll may the keel row that my laddie's in. The colliers that used to head off down to London were very dependent on the wind, obviously, being sail vessels, but it could take up to 2 weeks to make the journey down to London, and was probably the source, well, it was the source of one of probably the most beautiful songs from the northeast. And it's the fact that the hardest sailing was when it was fully laden and it demanded a wind to the south. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow the wind south o'er the bonny blow sail. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow, bonny breeze, my lover to me. They told me last night there were ships in the offing, and I hurried me down to the deep rolling sea. But my eye could not see it, where'er it might be in the bark that is bearing my lover to me. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow the wind south o'er the bonny blow sail. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow, bonny breeze, my lover to me. I stood by the lighthouse last time that we parted, till darkness came down o'er the deep rolling sea, till no longer I saw the bright bark of my true love. Blow, bonny breeze, and bring him to me. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow the wind south o'er the bonny blow sail. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow, bonny breeze, my lover to me. Is it not sweet to hear the wind singing, as softly it comes o'er the deep rolling sea? But sweeter and dearer my far when 'tis bringing the bark of my true love in safety to me. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow the wind south o'er the bonny blow sail. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow, bonny breeze, my lover to me. The biggest change in the whole of the mining industry came with the Industrial Revolution. It had a profound effect on the northeast, as you can see from the type of colliery that they used to build. Definitely a 1 horsepower colliery, this one. This is the Phoenix pit at Old Etherley in Durham. But despite that, there were big changes. Round about the time of the Industrial Revolution, there were new pits being sunk every week. And these were proper ones, not the old bell pit, but actual shafts being sunk and workings designed that went out from the shaft. They mostly started in central Durham, well, western Durham, sort of the centre of the country, where the coal measures were fairly close to the surface and were fairly easy to get, around about sort of 40 fathoms. and it was much the same up in Northumberland. But as the expertise increased, they gradually worked eastward and got deeper towards the sea. And so this one is Pemberton, Maine, where in fact it was one of the first collieries where they actually dug for coal underwater. It wasn't very successful at many times, Pemberton. It had quite bad problems with water leakage, but nevertheless they did make the aims to go out into the sea. Wallsend, got to refer to these ones. Wallsend in 1781 was 100 fathoms deep. It's Wallsend Colliery. Notice it's got quite modern now. It's got the two chimneys, which are for the ventilation systems, where they had a shaft that came up and they lit a fire and it sucked the air up and it took it down another shaft and kept this sort of movement of air, which was helped along by lads called trappers who kept doors closed so that the circulation of air worked in a special way. Hebburn in 1791 was 129 fathoms. Percy, Maine in 1802 was 120. Jarrow, got to put Jarrow in, I come from Jarrow, 128 fathoms in 1803, and down to Harton, which is sort of South Shields, I actually got a photograph of this one, in 1810 was 140 fathoms deep. I've been showing this one for 2 years, I think, and I've been showing it back to front every time. Tonight I was putting through and I thought, what's that written on there? And I suddenly realised it was Harton written back to front, so I've changed it around so you're the first one to see them. Anyway, Harton Colliery, I'm not proud.
What a fathom is for
A fathom, 6 foot. It's measured much because of the Tyne and its proximity to the sea and its sailing, which was there before. They used fathoms. I don't think, I'm fairly certain that they don't use fathoms now, and I don't think it lasted much after sort of the late 1800s, because after that, when you look through any details of sinkings of shafts, they were all done in feet. But the early ones were fathoms. During this period, places like Shildon and Spennymoor, which were just literally farmhouses on the maps by Morden in the 1700s and such like, quickly spread into villages. Our family actually comes from Spennymoor, which is in mid-south Durham, and the cottages built up. This is quite a luxurious set of Pitman's cottages in that it's got a second floor. It's probably a bit later than the period which I'm actually talking about, but you can see it had all mod cons. My grandfather actually told about his father. He used to tell me the story about how he came home from the pub one night and he went down to the toilet and fell asleep on the toilet. Now, there used to be the midden man who came round, and in these toilets there was a wooden trapdoor that used to lift up, and the midden man used to come round with his cart and clean it out every night. And he fell asleep and had a rude awakening with this midden man suddenly shoveling underneath him. Came to. Anyway, this geographical isolation, though it's sort of interesting in itself, is important, and it's one of the first stages in the development of any form of association or union of miners. The reason being that because these villages were so isolated, the owners of the collieries, or whoever leased them, was very dependent on the local labour that was available. And this was very much like the agricultural workers as well. And if any of them left, they weren't easily replaced. And so the owners used to guard against this, introduced a bond. And there were sort of very stiff penalties. It was a long period contract. And it was much the same as the rules of hiring and firing that was prevalent in the agricultural industry at that time, largely because the coal owners were the landowners who had all the farmers on at that time. They just found another way of making money. Not only could they make the money from the top of the land, they could actually make it underneath as well, and it didn't stop the farming going on. The bond was a very severe source of problem for the miners, as well as the agricultural workers, but particularly for the miners because of the style of their work. And it led to some of the early disputes, without any associations, but just disputes between groups of miners who were perhaps working for an owner. It happened on March the 23rd day, when our binding came on and we all went away, and our miners of Backworth, they all did agree, and the number of them was 103. As I've told you before, we agreed to a man to be true to each other and firmly to stand, but we broke through our rules and began for to bind. Since we're all brought to nothing, on both we are untying. We thought that the year 19 it was bad, it was all the whole cry, there's no money to be had, but it's nothing at all to this year 22. It's all the whole cry, alas, what shall we do? The likes of these times was ne'er seen before, since the first even morning became the first day. The poor's been oppressed this very long time, since we're all brought to nothing, on both we are in time. Though our binding money they've taken withal, we may see better days yet in spite of them all. To make themselves gentlemen I do protest, they don't know what way the poor to oppress. We're all brought to hardships as plain as you may see, which makes us lament now in every degree. This binding we've had on our own native shore, we ne'er will forget till our time is no more. Not a brilliant song, but it includes quite a lot of feeling in it, which is sort of pure good feeling of the miner themselves. In this particular century, there were probably more years of war with the Napoleonic Wars and such like than there were of peace. So the bond, although it was pretty vicious in one way, did have a slight advantage in that a bound man was protected from being taken into the army. In fact, some of the landowners used this to their advantage and would take on workers just on the promise that it would prevent them from being pressed into the army in any way. There was a letter read in Parliament about Sir Humphrey Mackworth from Mid-Durham who did this. It has been and still is the practice of Sir Humphrey Mackworth to receive and entertain at his mine adventurers, strangers, and idle persons without certificates or testimonials of their last legal settlements. He has been desired to give security to save the parish harmless from these men. To evade the Acts of Parliament and also the Recruiting Act, it is contrived that when persons come into the said work, they sign certain bonds or instruments which they are told are only to serve for a colour to keep them in the parish and from being taken into His Majesty's service. However, there was still quite a possibility that you could be taken into service in another way, and that was pressed into service. The Tyne was a thriving area for the press gangs. It had its own press officer who didn't give out news releases to the newspapers, but I've forgotten his actual title, or a regulating officer. His name was Captain Bover. And I'm going to do three little songs together. First one is Here's the Tender Comin', which is the tender that used to come ashore from South Shields, where the man of war used to lie off and pick up the men. The second one's Captain Bover, and it tells about how when he was about, the colliers that used to come back used to sail up to Druridge Bay, further up in Northumberland, and wait there until the man of war had gone, and then they would come back in. And the last one's about a keelman who's pressed into service and never seen again. Here's the tender come and press and all the men, oh dear hinnies, what shall we do then? Here's the tender coming off at Shields Bar, here's the tender coming full of men of war. Here's the tender coming pressing all the men, oh dear hinnies, what shall they do then? Hey, bonny lassie, let's come to the law, see the tender lying off at Shields Bar. With a colours flying anchor at a bow, the took me bonny laddie best of all the crew. Here's the tender come and pressing all the men. Oh dear hinnies, what shall we do then? Where hast thou been, my canny hinny? Where hast thou been, my winsome man? I've been to the nor'ard, cruising back and for'ard. I've been to the nor'ard, cruising sand long. I've been to the nor'ard, cruising back and for'ard, but durstn't come ashore for Bovar and his gang. I seen you, oh my bonny land, and are you sure he's weel, oh, he's gone our land, wi' a stick of his hand, he's gone to moor the keel, oh. I but have seen your bonny land across the sea. I spied him, his grave is green, but not wi' grass, and he'll never lie aside him. I seen you, oh my bonny land, and are you sure he's weel, oh, he's gone our land, wi' a stick of his hand, he's gone to moor the keel, oh. Tyne river running rough for smooth makes bread for me and mine. Of all the rivers north and south, there's none like Coley Tyne. So here's to Coley Tyne, me lads, success to Coley Tyne. Of all the rivers north or south, there's none like Coley Tyne. Our keelmen brave with laden keels go sailing down in line, and with them load the fleet at Shields that sails from Coley Tyne. So here's to Coley Tyne, me lads, success to Coley Tyne. Of all the rivers north or south, there's none like Coley Tyne. When Bonaparte the world did sway, Dutch, Spanish did combine, by sea and land proud bent their way the sons of Coley Tyne. So here's to Coley Tyne, me lads, success to Coley Tyne. Of all the rivers north and south, there's none like Coley Tyne. The sons of Tyne in the seas of blood Trafalgar's fight did join, when led by dauntless Collingwood, the hero of the Tyne. So here's to Coley Tyne, me lads, success to Coley Tyne. Of all the rivers north and south, there's none like Coley Tyne. Another song which comes actually not from Durham, but from over in Cumberland, is one collected by Bert Lloyd. Oh, what's the matter with you, me love? And where's your darling Jimmy? The soldier lads have taken him and sent him afar from me. Last payday he set off to town, and them red-coated fellows enticed him in and made him drunk, and he'd better gone to the gallows. The very sight of his cocking, it sets me heart a-sighing, and me, I nearly fainted twice. I thought that I was dying. Me father would have paid the sum out, and he run for the golden guinea. But the sergeant swore he'd kiss the book, and now they've got young Jimmy. When Jimmy talks about the war, it's worse than death to hear him. I must go out and hide my tears, because I cannot bear him, a brigadier or a grenadier. He says they're sure to make him, and he jibes and cracks his jokes, and bids me not forsake him. As I walk o'er the stubble field, below which run the sea, I thought of Jimmy hewing there, but it was all a dream. He hewed the very coals were burned, and it's when the fire I'm lighting to think those coals was in his hand. It sets me heart a-greeting. For 4 long years I followed him, now I must live without him. There's nothing left that I can do but weep and think about him. So break me heart and then it's all. So break me heart, me dearie, and I'll lie in the cold grey ground, for of single life I'm weary. Although the bond could protect the miners from military service, it was a very one-sided affair. They legally bound themselves, the miners, under a substantial penalty, to submit to the various fines and conditions, and usually to work at one colliery for a year. It wasn't actually for a year, it was for 11 months and 15 days. Because if they'd been there a year, they became incumbent on the parish to support them if they got into trouble, if they were ill or anything like that. But if it was 11 months and 15 days, they didn't actually become part of the parish. And so that way they were just left as vagrants. And this meant that they couldn't settle in the parish. However, even though they had to submit to being there for almost a year, the owner of the colliery gave them no undertaking that they would actually have any work. In fact, no continuous employment, or even any employment at all. And since they only got paid if they were employed, they could be in very serious problems because they couldn't go elsewhere because they'd already signed the bond. And so they were just stuck with nothing to do. I mean, obviously it didn't happen a great deal, but there were incidences of it happening. At some collieries, so the men lost quite a lot of wages over the year without necessarily being totally unemployed. They would be unemployed for perhaps weeks on end or even months on end. And the agreement itself, if for want of a better term, I mean, it was the fact that their name was on a bit of paper, it was hardly an agreement, didn't even guarantee them the rates of pay. The colliery owner could reduce their wages by mistakes, their mistakes or the colliery owner's mistakes. It really didn't matter. I won't go into any more details because I do come to that a little bit later. If the coals were sent up weren't correct, then the miners were sort of open to fines and all sorts of things like that, and they had actually no legal redress on the owners. The miners of Pontop Pike in 1763 signed a document that they engaged not to combine, strike or absent themselves from work, and every fortnight they would present a cove free to the owners. This is a cove, or a cove or a cove. Every fortnight one of those was given to the employers. Quite a weight of coal in them. They had to actually be loaded by a crane onto the rollies to move them to the bottom of the shaft. Also at Pontop Pike, that for every cove that was sent to bank insufficiently filled, they would be fined 1 shilling. And they bound themselves to keep the contract, or else there would be a fine of £18. The total wages of the miners for the year were around about £36 at Pontop Pike, so a fine of £18 didn't exactly do your budgeting much good for the year. It is recorded that Thomas Pirt, who was the father of one of the founders of the Northumberland Association of Miners, had 7 out of 8 coves rejected in a day's work. It meant he got paid for 1 out of the 8. And of course, the owner could still sell the coal. I mean, there was no harm in that because it was his coal. It was just the man who dug it didn't get paid. And of course, if he didn't get paid, then the putter who was shifting the coal to bank didn't get his money either. At the bottom of the shaft was this chap here called the keeker. To keek in Durham, Northumberland means to look. He's the overseer. And it was his job to inspect the coves to see whether they were correctly filled. And of course he was totally fair in doing this, despite the fact that for every one that he found insufficiently filled, he was paid a bonus. Didn't exactly seem to work in the favour of the miners, but never mind. A more serious strike, there'd been 1 or 2 strikes around Durham and Northumberland in the 1700s, but usually just an individual colliery and without any great effect at all. In 1765, the owners tried to change the time of the bond from October, which was a time of high demand, into March, when the demand was falling. They came out on strike, but they were beaten quite rapidly after about 3 weeks, and they went back to work. But the bond wasn't actually changed until 1809, and they changed it from then into October, from October into January, which was still not a very good time because they'd worked all the winter, and of course the winter doesn't affect you underneath the ground, so you just keep producing the coal, and the stocks would start to build up again. By January, they'd got over the worst part of the winter, and they knew that they had sufficient stocks for the summer, so the owners could pay a little bit less. There wasn't such a demand for the actual workers, so it wasn't quite so good. And in 1810, the miners realised that this wasn't really doing them much good, and so they came out on strike again. This is actually a drawing for the London Illustrated News, which is done at Hebburn Colliery in the 1810 strike. 7 weeks they received no wages at all, and they held mass meetings on the Durham moors and on the Newcastle moors of the miners, which 20,000 miners actually turned up. When you consider that most of the roads were mud tracks from mid-Durham and mid-Northumberland to get to towns like Newcastle and such like, 20,000 is quite a number of miners to turn up. They brought in the troops and dispersed the miners until the point that Durham jail was actually full. But the Bishop of Durham got involved in the strike even in those days. I think it was a different one, I'm not sure, because this one came in to help, and because Durham jail was full, he opened up his stables and they turned that into a prison as well. And he did his bit for the church. Anyway, at last the miners were starved into submission. There was no money at all coming in, obviously no strike funds or anything like that. And they went back to work. The owners eventually laid down that the binding day should be in April, which was considerably worse than they actually had, because April was a time of just total non-demand. Between 1810 and 1825, there was really very little happened in the Durham coalfield or the Northumberland coalfield, apart from the fact that there were 549 miners killed in 15 years. Oh, let's not think of tomorrow, lest we disappointed be. Our joys may turn to sorrows, as we all may daily see. Today we're strong and healthy, but tomorrow comes a change. As we may see from the explosion that's occurred at Trimden Grange. Men and boys set out that morning for to earn their daily bread, little thinking that by evening they'd be numbered with the dead. Let's think of Mrs. Burnett, once had sons but now has none. By the Trimden Grange explosion, Joseph, George and James are gone. February left behind it what will never be forgot. Weeping widows, helpless children may be found in many a cot. They ask if fathers left them, and the mother hangs her head. With a weeping widow's feelings, tells the child its father's dead. God protect the lonely widow, and lift up each drooping head. Be a father to the orphan, do not let them want for bread. Death will pay us all a visit, they have only gone before. And we'll meet the Trimden victims where explosions are no more. Right, well that's the bit on my paper where I folded the corner to say that there might be a raffle now. But what you might like to do while we have a bit of a break is that in the little pamphlet I handed out, in the back page, there is a facsimile of the tombstone for the Hartley Colliery disaster. And like the Trimden Grange disaster, which mentions the Burnett family, Joseph, George and James, the three sons who were killed, if you look in the Hartley Colliery disaster, you'll see, I think, 7 of a family who were wiped out in that one. I think 240 odd were killed in that disaster. You might care just to look through that list while we have a short break for the raffle. Okay. And 1825 was quite an important time for the miners in Durham and Northumberland, because there was quite a bit of, or an attempt at a social reform then by a man called Mackintosh. At that time there were very few educated pitmen about. It's hardly surprising really when you consider that they could go into the pits at 5-6 years of age and do sort of the menial tasks of putting, which is the moving of the coals. These are from the Employment Commission. They could also be trappers, which I explained before, sit and open the doors to let the putters through and close them again to maintain the flow of air. Trappers had a very boring job, and they were very badly used because they would sit perhaps for 20 minutes out of a 16 or 17 hour day. They'd sit for 20 minutes waiting for the next one to come through, fall asleep, and it held up the putter, and so the hewer would come along and beat them black and blue with the belt to wake them up, and that was their life, just sitting waiting to open this door for the putters to come through. A number of different ways of shifting the coals. Quite severe life for most of them. As I say, they could go into the pit at about 6 years of age. Some of them could spend up to 16 or 17 hours a day in the actual pit. Doesn't mean they actually were working all of that length of time, but most of them would work between 12 and 14 hours a day. And at 6 years of age, that's a considerable length of day to work. It is for anyone. I'm just a smally laddie, hardly old enough to hew, and if I'd me on a choosing, I would hew in 1 or 2. But somehow or other, how it comes, I divn't know. As sure as rub me cavil, it's the wassin' on the saw. I'll stop there in the song because that part of the verse, as sure as rub me cavil, it's the wassin' on the saw, is actually words. It does actually mean something. The putter used to work with a hewer. Now then, the tubs were done in groups of 13, and the putters used to have to run for the odd one, and they got the bonus for the odd tub, the 13th one. It was the sort of motivation for these putters to actually run with them rather than just slog along with them all day long. And they got paid this extra bonus for this odd tub, so he's running for the odd one. It depended whether you got with a good hewer, whether you were likely to move a lot of tubs or coves that they used in the pits for moving the coals around. And so they used to have a lottery when they first came down into the pit for the day. And what they used to have was a plank of wood known as the saw, because it was sawn with a saw. Simple as that. A plank of wood, rough cut. And on the reverse side of it, they had the hewers' names. And on the front side of it, they had a chalk mark for each name. And the putter would come up and he'd rub the cavil being a lottery. So as sure as rub me cavil, he'd get the wassin' on the saw, the worst one on the lump of wood. He'd get the hewer who couldn't actually do anything. So there he was for the rest of the day with this lazy hewer. And it meant that he wasn't going to earn much. There's a 6 gallons in the flat that I'm at now, and if I'd me on a choosing, I would hew in 1 or 2. But somehow or other, how it comes, I divn't know. As sure as rub me cavil, it's the wassin' on the saw. I'm running for the odd'n, running for the odd'n, running for the odd'n, frae Gann and down to Laos. There's a hitch and then a swally filled with what I like afford, and a lot away I'll twist it o'er the clarty gannon board. There's raw planks and raggy canches where you sometimes catch a smack, and it makes you twist your gizzard if you chance to catch your back. When running for the odd'n, running for the odd'n, running for the Orton frae Gan and down to Laws. There's a short plate and a long and near the double turning by. They've been fettled with the closer, but that closer win it lie. Now the short plate and the closer could they speak, what would they say? For I've telled them lots of secrets when I've tumbled off the way. I'm running for the Orton, running for the Orton, running for the Orton frae Gan and down to Laws. The last verse, the last line of the chorus says a lot. In fact, I think those last three words can say as much about the whole of the life in the pit as anything. Because for Gan and down to Laos means from going down to being set loose. Because it was regarded as being imprisoned for the day. So you gan down, you go down, and not until the end of the day are you set loose. So it's from Gannon down to Laos. And Laos is still known that in the pits in the northeast for the end of the day. So you gan down until Laos. Right, I think we're ready just to draw the raffle just for a moment quickly. Andy Tosh, who was quite an intelligent chap, and he decided that he would try and improve the pitmen's lot by starting to educate them. And he started a cooperative movement at Hetton in Durham to try and get books, create a form of education for the miners to use in their spare time. Not that they had a great deal, but he did try. The miners weren't that open to change like that, however. It's always funny, you talk about the good old days, and even in the bad old days, they talked about the good old days. So that in the 1800s, they had a song called The Pitmen's Happy Times, which looked back on the past. So, I mean, you know, we may be totally wrong about all this. It may be a totally wrong hypothesis that it was a bad old time. We didn't heed much learning then, we never went to school. Pit laddies worked for spending's sake, and none was thought a fuel. Now every bairn can read and write, astonishing to me. And the very dowpy on me lap can learn his ABC. But some get it right and some get it wrong by leaving books alone. But this I ken, nae times like mine, I'll ever come again. But this I ken, nae times like mine, I'll ever come again. However, Mackintosh didn't have much success, and through all of the prejudice, he left England and he went to live out the remainder of his life in America. It was a fairly common practice for miners to emigrate. The two main areas were California and Australia. My great-great-grandfather actually went off to California to dig for gold. I'm here today. He didn't find it. In fact, he was so unsuccessful he actually had to work his passage back on a ship. Australia was the big place to go and look for gold. Now Maras has gone to leave you, and says it will grieve me to leave me canny Tyneside shores where I've had many a spree. No, it's there again. It's too high, that. Now Maras has gone to leave you, and says it will grieve me to leave me canny Tyneside shores where I've had many a spree. Though it's there again me liken to vastrally Algan hiking, though our masters keep us striking, so what mun the pitmen do? I mind the time when collier lads could howk for gold at Yemen. I mind the time when collier lads could spend £1 each pair. But now the times they're queer, man, we've neither songs nor cheer, man. When we cannot raise our beer, man, it's time to gan away. I'll bid farewell to pit work, and I'll howk for lumps of gold, man. Why, in I'll soon be rich, I've a very little fear. So I'll say farewell to me mammy, me sweetheart of the lammie. for it's weel known as nae hammy, so to Vastrally lads I'll steer. O fare ye weel, ye happy scenes, where youthful days I've spent, man. Fare ye weel, for better times round here there'll never be. So I maun it be a gowk, man, though me belly me bowk, man. And me belly me bowk, man, I'll soon skim o'er the seas. There was very little organisation in the mining area until about 1830, when the two counties, Northumberland and Durham, joined together under Thomas Hepburn, who was the first of the great leaders of the miners, and it became known as Hepburn's Union. He did a great deal for the miners' cause, and it was largely through Thomas Hepburn that the public were made aware for the first time of the miners' problems and their general cause, largely through agitation. In 1831, all of the miners in Northumberland and Durham came out on strike for more wages and better conditions. There were 35,000 miners turned up on Newcastle Town Moor to demand these conditions, one of which was the abolition of the Tommy shop. Now, for those that don't know what the Tommy shop was, it was another one of these wonderful inventions that the mine owners had. If you remember, we said that they were geographically quite isolated, and so obviously there weren't many shops around. So the obvious thing to do was the mine owner would have a shop for the benefit of all these good, hard-working men. The thing was that they were only allowed to spend his money in the shop, and they weren't allowed to go anywhere else and spend the money because they were largely paid by tokens in those days, and so they had to go and spend it at his shop. And of course he could charge whatever he wanted for the goods, and they were quite considerably overcharged. It was very poor condition for them. They did actually, with the 1831 strike, get some solution to their grievances, in that boys, that's lads under 12, and girls, the working day was reduced to 12 hours. The miners, however, decided to hold out for more of the conditions that were actually asking for, the better wages, the better conditions, which included inspection of the mines, a restriction of the effect of the overseer, who could just decide arbitrarily whether the coves were full or not. And it got to be quite a nasty dispute, to the point that the magistrates decided that they would solve this dispute and they would arbitrate. And they would come out and they would have a meeting between the owners and the miners. However, they didn't turn up for the meeting on the 11th of April, and nothing else happened other than the fact that the mine owners brought in some workers from Wales, Ireland and Cornwall, and attempted to break the strike through that. And it's from this strike of 1831 that one of the most well-known songs sort of emerged. Because the miners weren't working, you could soon tell someone who was, these other chaps from other areas, and they were covered in coal dust. And the story has it that it's the source of the song, the Blackleg Miners. It's in the evening after dark, when the blackleg miner creeps to walk, with his moleskin pants and his dirty shirt. There goes the blackleg miner. He'll take his tools and down he goes to hew the coals that lie below. There's not a woman in this town row will gan with a blackleg miner. Oh, Delaval is a terrible place, the rub wet clay in a blackleg's fierce. Around the heap the run a foot race to catch the blackleg miner. Oh, Divin gan down the Seguil mine, across the way they stretch a line to catch the neck and break the spine of the dirty blackleg miner. He'll take your tools and duds as well and tie them down the pit of hell. Down you gan and fare thee well, thou dirty blackleg miner. So join the union while you may, don't wait till your dying day, 'cause that may not be far away, thou dirty blackleg miner. On the 18th of April, over 1,000 miners visited the collieries around South Northumberland. They went to Hartley and Felton Colliery, and they laid off the working by generally getting things and throwing them down the pit shaft and blocking the working, generally causing quite a bit of damage. It was the first violence that had arisen with the miners, and it was quite serious. However, it did have its humour. They went to visit the house of the overseer, a popular man, at Cowpen Colliery, and were obviously being educated by them because they left this message, which is actually in the Lytton Fill in Newcastle. Very well written as well, beautiful copper plate, isn't it? Wonderful. This isn't quite so nicely written. I was at your house last night and made myself very comfortable. You have no family, and you're just one man on the colliery. I see you have a great lot of rooms and big cellars, and plenty of wine and beer in them, which I got my share of. Now I know some at War Colliery that has 3 of our lads and lasses, and they live in one room, not half as good as your cellar. I don't pretend to know very much, but I know there shouldn't be that difference. The only place we can go to at the weekends is the alehouse and have a pint. I didn't pretend to be a prophet, but I know this, and lots of me marrows knows it too, that we're not treated as we ought to be. And a great philosopher says, to get knowledge is to know you're ignorant. But we've just begun to find that out, and ye masters and owners may look out, for you're not going to get so much of your own way in future. You're going to have some awards now. I didn't tell you my name, but I was one of your unwelcome visitors last night. The whole of the mining areas in Northumberland and Durham were in a very disturbed state by this time, with all of these miners going round, to such an extent that the 82nd Regiment were dispatched to Hetton. Hetton was where Thomas Hepburn came from, and it was obviously a bit like, I suppose, South Yorkshire is today. It was the seat of all the troubles at the time. And so the detachment, a whole regiment was sent to Hetton. And a detachment of Marines sailed from Portsmouth to Newcastle. On the 21st of April, a large meeting of miners went to Jarrow Colliery. Another cheer for Jarrow. Actually, just on that site now, there's quite a nice pub. Anyway, it's called the Jarrow Colliery. And it was the start of quite a tradition in the mines now, in that they paraded with banners. And it was the first parade of miners with lodge banners. I mean, they weren't the banners that you see nowadays, but they put their names on them and identified with their own lodge and with their own village. It's carried on into things like the Durham Big Meeting Day and the Northumberland Picnic, which are large processions of miners. I don't know if you've ever either seen them or seen them on the news, but it used to be a tremendous occasion when you'd go to Durham and watch all the villages march in, or like I used to do when I lived in Craghead, actually march in with the village. And there would be, sometimes, the height of it, I think there was something like 220 banners marched in, with something like 180 bands. It's down to something like 30 or 40 now, I think. Category D villages and closed down. And Crook Town, who were the champion band of Durham that year, came in, playing away, and they stopped in front of all the politicians up on the balcony of the hotel there in Durham, and they stopped playing and they stood for a minute. And the whole of the main Durham High Street, which stretched for about 2 miles from one end and up to the other, all stopped, and all the bands stopped, and everyone stood quiet, and there was a minute's silence. And if ever anything makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, it's seeing thousands and thousands of people in utter silence, and lots of embarrassed politicians on the balcony. Anyway, it lives in my memory, that one. On the 16th of May, a number of men on the strike tried to prevent some workers going into South Shields Colliery, and there was the possibility of quite a serious riot. Mr. Nicholas Fairless, who you'll hear about a little later, turned up with the Marines, and there was a bit of a battle with swords drawn, and the strikers fled. The next day at Hebburn Colliery, which is next to Jarrow, was actually the colliery where the Davy lamp was tested. Vast number of men went there, and they threw lots of stuff down the shaft, trapping some blackleg miners below ground, and really, I suppose, creating quite a danger. It was fortunate that many of them weren't killed, though they may not have thought so. In the middle of June, the men were actually victorious. They got the first agreement with the mine owners and got some of the conditions granted that they'd been going after that I explained about before. And Hepburn was appointed as leader of the union and paid a salary as the union leader, and was the first union leader in Northumberland and Durham actually paid a salary. Come all you honest pitmen lads, and listen a short while. It is concerning the agreement your time I will beguile. A glorious victory you have gained over your stubborn foes, makes me sing these lines with glee, which everybody knows. Some of you have been badly used, most shamefully used indeed. For out of doors you have been turned and left without your breed. Some of you have been turned out of doors, which I do still maintain, complying not with the demands of those whose home you did retain. Still round our banners we will stand in love and truth combine, and children yet unborn shall sing the lads of Weir and Tyne. Now let the colliers' hearts be glad while plenty round them shines, and blessed contentment flows along the banks of Weir and Tyne. Still round our banners we will stand, in love and truth combine, and children yet unborn shall sing the lads of Weir and Tyne. Brave Hepburn and our delegates like rays of virtue shine, their fame shall long be echoed round the banks of Weir and Tyne. Still round our banners we will stand, in love and truth combine, and children yet unborn shall sing the lads of Weir and Tyne. On Boldon's Fell our flags shall weave like victory's wreaths entwine, but peace shall be the motto still with lads of Weir and Tyne. Still round our banners we will stand, in love and truth combine, and children yet unborn shall sing the lads of Weir and Tyne. In 1832, the miners, sort of spurred on by this success, decided they would demand some more improvements in their conditions. However, the owners this time had got wise, and they employed vast numbers of blacklegs and threw the men out of their houses. The first evictions took place at Hetton. There's the other pit at Hetton, the Lech pit. And of course the mine owners also owned the property that the miners lived in, and so they had no rights at all over it. As soon as they weren't working, they were put out of the property. They were followed shortly by evictions at Friar's Goose near Newcastle, where there was a riot and there was some shooting in which some policemen were injured. Cavalry came and escorted 40 miners to Newcastle jail. The miners were in a difficult situation at this time, and the owners were gradually sort of squeezing them out of existence. We've got another London Illustrated News. Patience and perseverance will recover our rights. You see, this is the miners' side. It's very hard to read from there. We are determined to support the union as a check against any future act of oppression, but we are willing to treat with you on the same terms as last year. It says no prior conditions, you see this one. I am determined to support the coal owners. Oh, the rascals. Ah, that's Margaret Thatcher. They shall be turned out of their houses, every one of them. He even looks like McGregor, doesn't he? Oh, the fools. Things haven't changed really that much. However, on the 11th of June, there was a major event took place in the coalfield, which is hard to sort of look back on now and realise its significance. But Nicholas Fairless, who was the magistrate that I mentioned before, was riding to Jarrow from South Shields, which is a sort of along the river, passing a place called Tynedock. And just after Tynedock, there's Jarrow Slack, which used to be called Jarrow's Lake, but some map maker got it wrong in the past, and it still is known as Jarrow Slack. And he was stopped by two pitmen who asked him for some money for a drink. Now, before this trouble, he had been a fairly kind sort of man, not exactly kind, but he'd been a little bit generous with some of his money to some of the miners, and he had actually bought one of these men a drink before. And so they'd had a bit to drink, and they came up and asked him for another one. And he kicked one of the men, called Armstrong, kicked him away. Armstrong jumped on him, pulled him down, and beat him around the head with a branch of wood. He was quite severely injured, and it was only the Jobling, a man called Jobling, who jumped on Armstrong and pulled him up, that saved his life at that time. He was taken to his home in South Shields and said that the man that had done this was Armstrong, and that Jobling was not to be got because he tried to save his life. However, for some unknown reason, the next day he changed his story. He changed his story after Jobling had been caught, and said that Jobling was the man who'd done it. And so Jobling was tried, found guilty, taken to Durham jail, and hanged. And it says that when he was on the scaffolding, the yard was full of people to watch the actual hanging. And just as the bolt was about to be drawn, this voice from the silent crowd cried out, "Farewell, Jobling." And the legend has it that it was actually Armstrong, his accomplice, who called it out. Unfortunately, it meant that he turned his head just as the bolt was drawn, and it took him 7 minutes to die. Jobling was cut down and was embalmed in tar, encased in iron bands, and was hung on a 21-foot high scaffold above Jarrow Slack as a warning to the miners about what they would get if they carried on with their actions. This wasn't very popular, as you can imagine. What made it less popular was that at exactly the same time, a policeman called Wedder shot a miner called Cuthbert Skipsey in a pub in just an argument, personal argument, and killed the miner. And the policeman was given 6 months imprisonment. It so incensed the people that despite the fact that this was guarded by 4 Marines every night, they managed to cut down the body and spirited it away, and it's never been found since. The story is that it was buried in St. Paul's churchyard, which is just a little bit along from where the gibbet was put up, which was Bede's old church. If anyone's been up in the northeast and visited that, where St. Bede used to write the old monastery. And only about 8 years ago, a friend of mine actually uncovered the gibbet, which is now on display in an art gallery in Jarrow, along with a whole exhibition of work about Jobling. To the extent that Jarrow, people in Jarrow still know the story quite well, and it's still quite a powerful story even today in the town. And of course at that time it had a tremendous effect on the people of Durham and Northumberland. But Jobling became sort of a martyr to the cause of miners. Obviously quite unnecessarily so, but nevertheless quite a strong effect. However, with the fact that the owners had brought in so many workers from other counties, the strike was broken. And with it, the union itself. Hepburn couldn't get any employment at all in the area, and he was reduced to selling tea just to earn a living. He begged for work at Felling Colliery and was actually given a job on condition he had nothing more to do with unions. And his last words on unions were actually published at the beginning of this strike, which I thought was quite interesting. I recognised this headline. I thought I've seen those words somewhere before. And these were his words. "If we have not been successful, at least we as a body of miners have been able to bring our grievances before the public. And the time will come when the golden chain which binds the tyrants together will be snapped. When men will be properly organised, when coal owners will only be like ordinary men, and will have to sigh for the days gone by. It only needs time to bring this about." After that, there was absolutely nothing else heard of Hepburn in union affairs. It was 9 years before trade unionism actually raised its head again, when in 1841 Martin Jude succeeded in forming the Miners' Association of Great Britain. This association achieved quite a lot for miners, not by relying on strikes, but by making advances in the courts and conditions of Acts of Parliament that Martin Jude managed to, by speaking to the right people, get put through. However, he was blacklisted by all the owners in the country and criticised by the Newcastle papers, which was owned by many colliery owners, particularly the Newcastle Journal. He couldn't get any work. He was obviously a great intelligent man because he took a public house instead, which still stands in Newcastle, the 3 Tons. And it became the centre for union meetings of all walks of life, not just the miners, but the 3 Tons was the union pub in Newcastle. The strength of the actual association lay in the hiring of a man called W.P. Roberts, who was a Bristol solicitor. And what he did was he fought the cases in court and won some great victories. The New Miners' Union, the largest there was in all the 4 counties, to fight for the cause, fair wages for labour, inspectors for mines, and bring the coal owners to court for their crimes. A new fighting fund to go to the law, times they were changing, it was now 42. Jude was the leader, to him they report, Roberts the lawyer would battle in court. There were 20,000 bold mining men, to Shadden's Hill they were marching again. Once more united, they trudged through the snow, support for the Union, come weal or come woe. It was put to the vote, everyone for restriction of labour, the coal field at war, the first shot in the battle, the miners won't bind. Got the wrong tune. Bind the voice of the dumb, not heard by the blind. In 1844, the miners felt in such a strong position that they had a mass meeting on Black Fell in Durham, and they agreed to press for 5 points. That they would be paid by weight instead of measure. So instead of the coal being looked at to say, no, that's insufficiently filled or something, they would actually have it weighed. And as part of that, the second point was that the weighing would be done by a beam scale. I suppose the obvious thing is that they could get people to lift it up and say, oh, that's not very heavy, is it? So they decided they would press for a beam scale to actually weigh it. That they would have half-yearly contracts. They would have an abolition of fines for insufficiently filled coals and such like, and a guarantee of 4 days' work or 4 days' wages per week if they couldn't actually work for reasons beyond themselves. The mine owners refused to recognise the union and said they would only deal with individuals. However, the meetings continued, and one of the characters of the meeting was a chap called Ben Embleton, and he used to go around announcing the meetings by getting a bleaser. And a bleaser in the northeast is a square of metal with a handle on that you hold on the front of the fire, and it makes it blaze up nicely. I don't know what you call them around the area. I'm sure you have them. I mean, apart from the shovel with a sheet of newspaper over, the same thing. A draw tin, yes. Okay, a draw tin. We call them blazers. And he used to go around banging on a blazer with a poker. Bang the blazer, Ben. Bang the blazer, Ben. Cry fear ye not the masters, join the union men. The year was 1844, the big strike had been lost. Trudged the miners back to work to reckon up the cost of 20 weeks' privation, not one concession won. The men were 10 times worse off than when they had begun. Bang the blazer, Ben. Bang the blazer, Ben. Cry fear ye not the masters, join the union men. The union tried to rally, but meetings they were few. There was no work for union men if e'er the masters knew. to stir the old emotions along the wear and Tyne. Brave bold old Ben Embleton kept banging out this rhyme: bang the bleezer Ben, bang the bleezer Ben, cry fear ye not the masters, join the Union men. A voice that has gone through the breadth of the land, that the Tyne, Wear and Tees, they are all hard to stand. The miners have struck, for they've been oppressed, and no more will they work till their wrongs are redressed. For 10 years or more we've been regular slaves, bound down by our masters, the greatest of knaves. But no longer we'll bear it, for now we are free. For right will beat might, that our masters will see. No more will they get us to work by the fines, for the splint and the foul coal we get in the mines. And the word separation won't stand in our bill, for both roundy and small in the tub we will fill. For their measures and steel yards we'll do them away, for by them they've robbed us for many's a long day. We will work by the weight now, for it is our will, that a just beam and scale it do stand on the hill. Now you see what we want, and I think you will say that the miners are asking out of the way. Then haste to the rescue, help the sons of the mine, cheer on the brave lads of the Tees, Wear and Tyne. On binding day in 1844, the men in every colliery in Northumberland and Durham, that was 33,990 of them, refused to renew their bonds, and in the following months the eviction started. It was in November, and I never will forget, the policers and the candy men at Hawkey's houses met. And Johnny the bellman, he was there squinting round about, and he put 3 men at every door to turn the pitmen out. Ah, what would I do? Had I the power mysel', why I'd hang the 20 candy men, and Johnny we carries the bell. They went from house to house, and then they put things on the road, but mind they didn't hurt themselves with carrying heavy loads. One would carry a poker out, a fender or a rake, and if they carried 2 at once, why it was a great mistake. Ah, what would I do? Had I the power mysel', why I'd hang the 20 candy men, and Johnny we carries the bell. Some of these dandy candy men were dressed up like a clown. Some had hats without a flipe, and some without a crown. And there was one chap with them, and I swear that he was worse, 'cause every time he did bend down, why it was a laughable farce. Oh, what would I do? Had I the power mysel', why I'd hang the 20 candy men, and Johnny we carries the bell. Some of them had nae laps nor had nae buttons on their coats, and one of them had a bear in his apron lapped around his throat. One of them had a pair of breeks that belonged to the boy, and one leg was a sort of tweed and the other was corduroy. Oh, what would I do? Had I the power mysel', why I'd hang the 20 candy men, and Johnny we carries the bell. And next there come the masters, and I think they should be shamed, depriving wives and families of a comfortable yam. And when they gone from where they live, I hope they gone to hell, along with the 20 candy men, and Johnny we carries the bell. Oh, what would I do? Had I the power mysel', why I'd hang the 20 candy men, and Johnny we carries the bell. Eviction started in November, and the miners were put out into tents, and they spent most of the winter in tents up on the moors of Durham. I mean, the tents weren't exactly your luxury mountain tents. They were generally blankets spread over a few sticks, perhaps a bit of tarpaulin that they managed to get, or something like that, but very basic things. By the end of 1844, the miners were quite decidedly beaten. with the effect of the evictions, and they all had to go back. At that time, a man came down from Scotland called Alexander MacDonald, who was an agitator, a political agitator, and he put his full effort behind building a national organisation of miners. And by 1863, the National Miners Union, I get it confused, but the National Miners Union was established with 50% of its members from Northumberland and Durham. You're very lucky, actually. You've got through to nearly the end without me actually getting the pages mixed up. I actually went from 1600 to 1800 once, which was very confusing, especially when I went back to 1700. It wasn't entirely fruitless, however, because the yearly bond was entirely removed, and it was given up in favour of fortnightly contracts. The Lancashire miners formed a union to pay W.P. Roberts, who we've mentioned before, and they actually paid him £1,200 a year salary, which was a considerable amount of money, and obviously they considered him well worth it. The Durham struggle itself helped to achieve a significance for the miners, which they gained through the newspapers. Another thing which made a deep impression on the public was that in 1844, on September the 28th, there was an explosion at Haswell Colliery, which there were 96 men and boys killed. And Roberts managed to gain an interview with the Prime Minister at the time, Sir Robert Peel, and they established a safety report for mines, which was published in 1850. And safety inspectors were then allowed in mines, apart from Lord Londonderry's, who said that if any safety inspectors went down his mines, they'd stay down. That was in Parliament, and anyway, he was outvoted. In 1849, the Durham County Association was reformed, and there were many sorts of local strikes, Westmoor, Seaton Delaval. However, as I said, Alexander MacDonald came down from Scotland, and he was a schoolmaster. What he did was that he agitated generally, and he made certain demands. He wrote a letter when he came up to Durham. He actually came down from Scotland up to Durham, if you can follow that. It was in 1856 that I crossed the border first to advocate a Better Mines Act. True weighing, the education of the young, the restriction of age to 12 years, the reduction of the working hours to 8 in every 24, the training of managers, the payment of wages weekly in current coin of the realm, no truck, and many other useful things. Truck was the payment by tokens for the truck shops, the Tommy shops. Shortly after that, bone began to come to bone, and by 1858 we were in full action for better laws. The pitmen pledged to keep the peace of 44, even when the candy men turned them from the door. But when the boys of Barrington did strike in 49, we heard the voice of violence cry for vengeance on the Tyne. Bang the Bleezer Ben, bang the Bleezer Ben, cry fear ye not the masters, join the Union men, resolving not to keep the peace of 44. If strangers came to Barrington, the pit would work no more. They said they'd mark the candy men, the flame of hate they lit, with a warning to the blacklegs they'd be buried in the pit. Bang the Bleezer Ben, bang the Bleezer Ben, cry fear ye not the masters, join the Union men. The years gone by we march anigh to 1852. Union pits were hard to find, although there were a few. Later still one stood alone, 'twas loyal Delaval. The hardships of our Union men were more than tongue can tell. Bang the Bleezer Ben, bang the Bleezer Ben, cry fear ye not the masters, join the Union men. If you're inclined to hear a song, I'll sing a verse or two. But when us done, ye's gone in to see that every word is true. The miners of South Meadhamsley they never will forget, for Isaac and his tyranny and how they have been tread. For in the midst of danger these hardy sons did toil, for the turn down for to earn their daily bread, so far beneath the soil to make an honest living these miners did contrive, but ye shall see how they were served in 1885. Oh, the miners of South Medemsley, they're ganning to make some stew, they're ganning to boil fat postic and his dirty candy crew. The master should have naught but soup as long as they're alive, in memory of the dirty tricks in 1895. Below the county average then the men was 10%, but Isaac the unfeeling Curry couldn't rest content. A 10% reduction from the men he did demand, but such a strong request as this the miners couldn't stand. The notices was all served out, and when they had expired, all the gear was brought to bank and the final shot was fired. To hurt dishonest working men this low-lived man did strive. He'll often rue for what he did in 1895. Oh, the miners of South Medemsley, they're gunning to make some stew, they're gunning to boil fat postic and his dirty candy crew. The master should have naught but soup as long as they're alive, in memory of the dirty tricks in 1885. Commander Postic gave the word and they started with their work, but they were done at 5 o'clock, they durstn't stop till dark. And when they'd done all they could and finished for the day, the bobbies guarded Postic and his dirty dogs away. For Isaac was the tyrant, the owners was the same. For all the turnout of the strike, they were the ones to blame. Neither them nor Postic need think they'll ever thrive for what they did to Dipton men in 1885. Oh, the miners of South Medemsley, they're gunning to make some stew, they're gunning to boil fat Postic and his dirty candy crew. The master should have naught but soup as long as they're alive, in memory of the dirty tricks in 1895. The South Medemsley strike was one of the many strikes that went on over lots of small negotiations within the county, rather than it being one overall strike of the county. Over the 20 years from sort of 1863, there were quite significant improvements. As I said, the abolition of the yearly bond. And between 1874 and 76, there were 4 successful arbitrations for wages. In 1890, there was quite a major decision which took place, which affected the whole of the outlook of the miners and of the mine owners. Instead of carrying on with the demand for a 5% increase in wages, they asked for a reduction in the working hours to 7 hours a day. This was actually hewing time. It didn't include the time it took to get to the pit face or anything like that, but actually 7 hours at the coal face. And this was granted. John Wilson, who was the leader of the Durham Miners Association, said that a more beneficial decision has never been come to in the whole of our history. However, it was a long time before the miners could actually trust the coal owners. There was still considerable use of children in the mines, not as young, but they were still used for very menial tasks. And as I say, it was a long time before miners could trust coal owners. In 1892, the Durham owners proposed a 10% cut in wages on the grounds of a fall in coal prices. The men rejected this and were locked out. After 6 weeks, the owner said they could go back with a 13.5% reduction. That was once again refused. And after 12 weeks further strike, they eventually came back with the 10% reduction. In our Durham County, I am sorry for to say that hunger and starvation is increasing every day. For the want of food and coal we know not what to do, but with your kind assistance we will stand the struggle through. I need not state the reason why we have been brought so low. The masters have behaved unkind, as every one will know. because we won't lie down and let them treat us as the like. To punish us, they've stopped the pits and caused the present strife. The pulley wheels have ceased to move, which went so swift around. The horses and the ponies too are brought from underground. The work is taken from us now, they care not if we die. For they can eat the best of food and drink the best when dry. The miner and his good wife too each morning have to roam, to search for food to feed the hungry little ones at home. The flour barrel is empty now, our true and faithful friend, which makes the thousands wish today the strife was at an end. We have done our very best as honest working men, to let the pits commence again. We've offered to them 10. An offer they will not accept, they firmly do demand 13.5%, or let the colliery stand. Why, let them stand, or let them lie, to do with them as they choose. To give them 13.5, we ever shall refuse. They're always willing to receive, but they're never inclined to give. Very soon they won't allow a working man to live. May every Durham colliery owner that is in the fold receive 9 lashes of the rod, and his back be rubbed with salt. May his backside be covered in boils, and may he never sit and never burst until the wheels go round at every pit. The miners of Northumberland we shall forever praise, for being so kind and helping us these tyrannizing days. We thank the other counties too that have been doing the same, and everyone who hears this song will know we're not to blame. It sounds a bit relevant to the present one, that one, so always whenever I sing it. Anyway, 16 weeks after 16 weeks the lockout, the union proved its strength, and the miners returned eventually at their old wage. But there was still a very long way to go, and a lot of work with the union still to be done. We've come up to about 1900, and I only run this from 1600 to about 1900. There's a lot of interest after that, but it seems to go into a different phase of interest. And so I finish with one of the songs which comes from the end of the 19th century, which is written around about 1898. It died out quite a bit until it was picked up by the Philadelphia miners in America and used as a recruiting song for them, and came back over to this country. And they asked me not to sing it in Nottingham Club the other night. It's Friday, in fact, so we'll sing it now. Please join in. Miner's life is like a sailor's board a ship to cross the waves. Every day his life's in danger, still he ventures being brave. Watch the rocks, they're falling daily, careless miners always fail. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. Union miners, stand together, do not heed the owner's tale. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. You've been docked and docked again, lads, you've been loading 2 for 1. What have ye to show for working since your mining days begun? Worn out boots and worn out miners, and the children looking pale. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. Union miners, stand together, do not heed the owner's tale. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. Soon your troubles will be over, union men will have the rights. After many years of danger, digging days and digging nights, it's by honest work we labour, careless miners always fail. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. Union miners, stand together, do not heed the owner's tale. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. In conclusion, bear in memory, keep this password in your mind. God provides for honest workers when in union they combine. Stand like men and stand together, victory for you'll prevail. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. Union miners, stand together, do not heed the owner's tale. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. Union miners, stand together, do not heed the owner's tale. Keep your hands upon your wages and your eyes upon the scale. Thank you very much. Good night.